All right. Hey, Heinrich, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm good.
Hey, good to see you.
Set up here.
Yeah. Okay. Well, just out of the respect of people's time who were on time, thank you guys so much. And again, we're gonna have people filtering in, so may need to backtrack slightly, but that's okay. Um, but yeah, welcome everyone. It's great to have you join us today. If you're calling in from Vancouver, the weather's not cooperating quite as it should, so awesome Thursday to take in a web shop here. But my name's Steven. I'm going to be one of your hosts for today's web shop. So we're excited to welcome you all to part 3, the final installment of our Beyond Price and Quality web shop series, and discuss the final 5% of a project, which is going to be mastering project closeout. So prior to diving in, one of my absolute favorite aspects of this web shop is drawing your attention to an exciting giveaway. So you have the opportunity today to win a $200 Amazon gift card during today's session. So we're going to be awarding this to one lucky attendee. And the rules for entry are simple. Whoever asks the best question today will be selected as our winner and contacted afterwards. So looking forward to getting into things and hearing some of the awesome questions from our audience. So the agenda on the screen, but just prior to diving into that, I just wanted to go over a couple housekeeping notes and address those. So we've limited audio and video to just the presenters, Heinrich and myself today. So not to worry if you're wondering why you're able to go on camera or off of mute. And although this is a presentation, we invite you guys to partake and interact with us throughout the session. So this really is meant to be more of a true workshop rather than just one-way communication. So please feel free to interrupt us and engage and leverage the Q&A function. So as a note, that Q&A can be found on the far left side of your drop-down bar in the Zoom window here. If you just click more, you'll see that Q&A drop-down. That's how you're going to be able to interact with us throughout here. We are going to have a designated Q&A at the end of this session, but that does not mean that we won't take pause to answer anything as it arises. Otherwise, anything we can't get to, we'll maybe leave and address it towards the end. But the other thing I would say, don't worry about taking extensive notes. Either you're obviously more than welcome to, but all attendees today will receive a copy of today's presentation for your reference and a few other valuable and key takeaway items, some tools and templates that we're going to go through with you guys as well. So just touching on the agenda. So starting off today, once we're done our brief introduction here and a bit more of an introduction to who we are, WCP Building Renewal, we're going to dive into the core content of today's session, which will be going through stage 1. That will be preparing for a seamless job close. And then finally, that stage 2, project closeout processes. Awesome. So probably wondering who this other gentleman is joining me on the call today. This is my pleasure to introduce Heinrich Schumann, managing partner of WCP Building Renewal. Heinrich, bringing a wealth of experience with him today, over 20 years in the industry, actually, and then closing in on, Heinrich, what would you say, 5,000 projects? Something.
Oof, it's been that long. Oh man.
Well,
How many?
I said 4,500 projects over a year ago, and I think there's been well beyond that. So closing in on 5,000 projects that Heinrich's directly overseen in that time. So yeah, great to have you join us today. You'll also notice our super admin, Lisa Garrett, she's going to be monitoring the Q&A chat box today. So as you guys are filtering in those questions and starting to see those come through now, that's who's going to be on the other side of those questions answering. And of course, as mentioned, I'm Steven, Business Development Manager. So moving right along, and just like I said, brief introduction to who we are. And we do get a lot of questions about our name. And no, it is not WCB. I do say WCP sometimes at networking events. People tend to run the opposite direction from me. But what does WCP stand for? And that's a great question. WCP is an acronym for our original name. And sometimes this is a light bulb moment, but our original name, Wolfgang Commercial Painters. So that's who you might better know us as, or you might recognize that name. But WCP really just serves as a tribute to our 20 years in business as Wolfgang Commercial Painters. And then you also might be wondering, why we've added building renewal to our name and what the heck building renewal is. And that's a great question. So simply put, building renewal encompasses the revitalization and restoration of a building's exterior and interior surfaces, which include high and low-rise building restorations and interior common area remodels. So a bit more of a detailed look at our services. Like I said, we've expanded beyond just commercial painting, although it does remain to be one of our core services. You see, as it relates to building envelope, we have much more robust services that we provide. So restoration as it relates to concrete, wood, and metal, membranes of all kinds, sealants and caulking, waterproofing, of course, that's a big service request we get, being that we're in Vancouver and it rains quite a lot, but brick repointing and other service requests that is coming through more and more. And then oftentimes how we kick projects off, which is through inspections. And then, yes, we do interior services. Just the other day I was with a client and I mentioned something to do with interior and he said, I never would have thought of you guys for interior services. So I think it is important that we mention this. We do interior services, drywall and texture repairs, interior commercial painting, of course, finished carpentry, wall coverings and protection, as well as design consultation. So interior service as it relates to common areas. And then sometimes it's actually easier to just note the services we do not provide rather than the services we do. So very simply, the services we don't provide, we are not new construction or development. We don't do any disaster restoration as it relates to fire and flood. And then we don't do windows and roofing installation. But of course, oftentimes with our projects, there's some overlap. So, happy to evaluate those as well. Okay, very briefly, I'm just going to take you guys through almost like a lightning round of a couple of case studies. And I just spoke to our services and who we are. So I wanted to actually showcase those services in action. So starting off with our clients at Hopewell, Campbell Heights. This is a massive industrial park located in South Surrey. If you're not familiar with it, it truly is huge. And two-story tilt-up concrete warehouses as far as the eye can see. But these buildings, only being about 4.5 years old, were experiencing some pretty substantial and systematic issues. So we came on board. The photo that you guys are seeing is actually the after. I wish I could show you guys a before. We could do a full, probably hour case study on this project alone. But as you see, tons and tons of work and extensive work that went into those. Those buildings look fantastic. My favorite note, and I will say, favorite story about this project, these sites and these warehouses are so large that our teams actually brought out their pedal bikes so that way they could get around those locations rather than putting on about 20 to 25,000 steps per day. But moving right along. So the Deborah, this is a building located over in the West End in Vancouver, a private holdings company, a client that we've worked with for over 20 years now. But one of their assets here, when we first came on to do an inspection of this building, there was substantial concrete failure, concrete spalling, cracks throughout the building. The railings were actually detaching in certain locations. So we did a full holistic building renewal. And, this one's close to our heart because this is actually one of the first full all-encompassing building renewal projects that we actually did. That building still looks fantastic today. And then I did mention that we do interiors. So I wanted to showcase a quick interior project that we did. Spring Hill Place, 604 Real Estate. I actually think we have some representation from 604 Real Estate today. So welcome to you guys. But this is just an interior common area building that we had done. So drywall texture restoration, wall coverings removal and skim coating, finished carpentry, lighting upgrades, as well as wall interior paintings throughout the entire interior common area of the building. And I believe this building is about a 14-story residential tower in North Vancouver. Now, important piece, because oftentimes when I mention our case studies, I leave the lasting impression that, hey, these guys only do larger scale projects, which is not true. We absolutely do smaller maintenance projects. And a good example to just kind of showcase that, was just speaking with a client last week. We went on site to do about a $2,500 quick maintenance project on one of his buildings. At the exact same time, we're in discussions doing about a $2.5 million project with the same client. So just kind of showcases, the range in which projects that we tackle, we take on, and that we can kind of do comfortably. But okay. Oh, and then lastly, again, we're really proud of this slide. Some of our commercial and property management partners, some of these guys we've been working with, for as long as Wolfgang's been around, so over 20 years. We've got some representation today from some of these clients, so I'm sure you're seeing a couple of familiar logos on the screen here. But we are really proud of these partnerships, and just felt that it was worth noting and showcasing. So that's enough for me. I know that was a bit of a lightning round, but just the intro. We're over it, guys. So I'm going to pass things off. Heinrich's going to take us through some of the things you guys can come to expect to have as a takeaway from today. So Heinrich, please go for it.
All right. Well, thank you, Stephen. Good morning, everyone. Hope you are well. As we jump in here to mastering the project closeout. So, a couple of things just to highlight before we jump in. For one, it needs to be said, obviously, we are a building renewal company, but these tools really apply to any trade that you're working with, whether it's plumbing or landscaping, HVAC, roofing, these really apply. They're all a little bit different, but we're going to really be talking high level about some of the things that you can do to make sure projects close out effectively, right? So that's the first thing to note. Second thing to note is, I always say this, whether it's a lunch and learn or a web shop like this, if there's just one thing that you can take away and apply moving forward coming out of this, it's all worth it. Worth the price of admission. Which Stephen, how much was this again? What was the price of admission on this?
Oh, I believe it was free 99, if I remember.
Right. Yes. So anyway, look, just one thing, capture it, and then say, great, that's the thing I'm going to apply. It's absolutely worth it. So I'd encourage you to look out for that one thing. Okay. So what are we covering today? Well, we're gonna, the main outcomes here, how to prepare for a seamless job close, seamless project close. Like so much in life, preparation, it's all about preparation. And we'll talk about the key things you can do well ahead of the project close to ensure you're set up for success. Then the second phase, we're going to talk about the key steps for that project closeout process, dive into those. The third major component, and this is short, but sweet and important, and that's how to pull a project out of the fire. Look, there's no perfection here. There's lots of variables at play, and sometimes you just need a really basic tool to pull it out of the fire. And that's what we're going to provide, and we'll talk about. And then finally, tools and templates, right? Throughout, we're going to give you just an assortment of tools and templates that you can use, abuse, adjust, and tweak accordingly, right? They'll form a nice baseline that you can leverage. So that's the game plan. That's what we're going to be covering as we dive in. So let's do it. Okay, so preparation, how to prepare for a seamless job close. So two crucial steps that I'm going to go through with you, and I'll state, and some of you might be aware, I see some familiar faces or names, so to speak, in here. So you might have seen our lunch and learns previously or other web shops. As Stephen mentioned, we have two other web shops. This forms kind of part 3. And this preparation, fittingly, is the highlight of those two sections, right? So let's jump in and see what those are. Okay, so step 1 in this preparation for a seamless job close, a project tender meeting, right? So what is that? First off, what is a project tender meeting for those unaware? Well, I mean, it's so the project hasn't even been awarded yet. This is that phase where you're bringing your stakeholders together, specifically your potential contractors, to a meeting on site to get aligned on a few key things: scope of work, project requirements. And you have this sort of think tank of all the key people that could be involved in the project to deal with any potential issues that maybe you're unaware of, right? So everybody comes together with that. You get aligned, you get clarity on all of those items, and you're set up for success. So why is this important for a job close, right? Why are we doing a project tender meeting, and why do we care in terms of a job close itself? This meeting is going to do a variety of things, as mentioned. It's going to allow you to tour the site and make sure your scope of work really is comprehensive. Why is that key? Minimize change orders, minimize issues and problems that could come up. Oh man, we didn't deal with that elevation and the fact that there's power lines involved there. That could derail the entire project if we don't deal with it now, ahead of time. Talk about it and get a game plan. That's one of the real world, and there's countless real world reasons why something like this is so important. You can also deal with any other problems that pop up. Like there could be permit issues or other access problems, repairs that haven't been addressed. And one other thing I'll note, this really gives you a chance to feel out your potential contractors, right? If you haven't interacted with them previously, it just gives you a chance to say, hey, how do they respond? How's their communication? What's their responsiveness like? Professionalism. All those factors are really key. And there's many ways to go through this. It doesn't all need to be in person. That's preferred, but we can leverage technology. We've got lots of it to do these meetings that way as well. So that's the first step, really important key step. And along those lines, I think we actually have a tool, our first tool that we're going to provide to you coming out of this, and that's the contractor vetting checklist. Right. And again, you can use this as a template and adapt it, add in. It won't come in exactly in this form. It'll kind of be a format that you can use and leverage. You just can't remove the WCP building renewal logo. Stephen, we've locked that in, right? It's just in there no matter what. Good.
Can't have one without the other, exactly.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, so look, this tool is really helpful just in terms of like, hey, what do I want my contractor to bring to the table here for this? And different trades and different projects require different things. So you can kind of like add or subtract accordingly. So here you see safety requirements, association membership, perhaps there's validity there, online compliance, if that's aligned with your organization, certifications, there might be some key certifications for this, financial credentials even, like certain projects that might be a case, whether it's bonding, liability insurance, pretty common, et cetera, et cetera. So leverage that tool, it's fantastic. Okay. Let's move on here to the next key stage. The pre-production meeting. Okay, so what have we done here? We've gone through a project tender meeting process. You've gotten everything on the same page. Everybody's aligned, and you've selected a great contractor. Hopefully the right contractor for this project. Let's cross our fingers. Now it's time to start the project. Fantastic. What's the most important thing to do when you start a project? And what's the most important thing you can do to ensure that the project closes out well? It's this pre-production meeting. Okay, why is that so important, right? Why is it so important? Again, it's about alignment. This kicks off the start of the project. It hasn't even started yet, but everybody meets, again, all the key stakeholders that will be involved in the project itself. So probably an on-site contact, maybe you, if you're helping the process, maybe not, right? But perhaps you're there as well, right? You have to decide on that. Certainly the contractor is there. Are there architects involved? They should probably be there. Is there an engineer involved? Bring them there as well. Everybody gets on the same page here to make sure you're addressing any issues, right? Up front as the project begins. What are you going to get alignment on in this meeting? Logistics, where is equipment going to go? Where's materials going to go? What about tenants and tenant concerns? Is it a residential, multi-unit residential? Perhaps there's a prized garden, is this a commercial thing? We've got a heavy traffic area with lots of, trucks and so forth. How are we going to address those? All those things need to be addressed, and ideally, not even just ideally, really out of necessity, they need to be addressed in person. So make sure that happens. Communication, there's another really important one, right? So what's the communication process? What's the noticing process, and what does that look like? What are the project updates? What's the regularity of those updates, and getting alignment and agreements on that? Really important. You can imagine, like, why is this important to the job close? Well, those things need to be set up and aligned on. If they're not, you're going to run into hurdles and problems down the road. If there's poor communication or misaligned communication, that's going to lead to issues that are going to compromise the end of the project. right? So some major pieces there, and a final one to highlight before we move on, and that's just key roles. Who's doing what, right? Like clearly identifying a project manager. There's probably going to be some sort of site lead as well. There's going to be a key contacts and other roles. We talked about engineers, architects, etc. And what is everybody's role and how are they involved? So a really important meeting. If you follow those steps and go through that, get that pre-production meeting done, you're set up for success, right? There's no perfection here, right? But you're set up for success if you do those things as a preparation standpoint. Good. All right. I think we have another tool that we can offer here. Okay, and that's this pre-production form. So this is really just to help guide the pre-production process, whether you're involved directly or you just pass this on to your contractor or your site lead or whatever, or you just send this out an email and be like, hey, follow a format like this. You can use this document and use it effectively. So you see some administrative details there. You see scope and scheduling specifics, Yeah, you can just like define those, and put those in place. And then schedule review, we give a bunch of potential things that could come up. And again, take things out, add things in, leverage this tool to make sure you do pre-production meetings or your team does pre-production meetings or your contractor and do them effectively. Good. All right. Now let's get into an exciting pitfall or issue that pops up. Look at that. All big and bold. All stakeholders not at the tender or pre-production meeting. Okay. Why is that an issue, or why could that be an issue, right? Kind of spoke to it previously. You don't bring all the people together and aligned. What happens? Misaligned communication. Somebody comes in after the fact and starts asking questions that didn't get addressed previously, and you just get everything grinds to a halt. And this applies at both of those meetings, right? Let's, for example, you're at the pre-production meeting and you don't have that key site contact that's there, right? That's going to help facilitate the process because they can't make it. Well, that's a big issue because now they're not in the loop. Even if they read an email after the fact, they don't have all the information. They didn't walk around and discuss. So they're going to be asking questions. They're going to be confused, frustrated, because they don't have all the information, and it's going to lead to problems. So just bring everybody together for these meetings. It's such an important step. It feels like a lot in this day and age to actually come together, but it's so crucial. Okay, so that's our key piece there. All right.
Okay. Well, just to interject and as a note and a reminder to everybody on the call, we are giving away a $200 Amazon gift card. All it takes to enter, pose the best question, which will then be selected by Heinrich and myself after the call here. So yeah, feel free. That Q&A section or the Q&A function, just as a reminder, in your Zoom drop down on the far right, you're going to see a circle with 3 dots. If you click that, underneath the drop down, there's a Q&A, and then we will be happy to answer your questions. Whoopsie daisy, going a bit too far. Okay, so screen full of logos you're probably seeing more and more often. So just a quick show of hands, and again, leveraging that Q&A function, who here is already using AI in some way in their day-to-day?
Oh, me.
There you go. Nice. And also, what are you finding it most useful for? I'm always so interested to ask this and find this out, because different people are going to use it for different functions. So in your day-to-day, what are you currently finding it most useful for, right? Is anyone using it specifically for something like project tendering or proposal prep? Okay. We're at this interesting intersection right now, right? The tools are powerful, but most people aren't quite sure how to actually apply them in their roles. So today, we're just going to walk you through a super practical use case tailored for our world, right? How you can use AI to accelerate and improve construction tendering. So this prompt that I use ChatGPT. I mean, it's my preferred, but everybody's using Gemini, for example, because that's just baked right in now to your Google search, but also Grok, whatever the case might be. But for this one in particular, I was using ChatGPT. So nothing fancy, but the prompt I said is, I'm a property manager preparing to tender a construction project. I need a tender form that outlines the scope of work, contractor requirements, evaluation criteria, and submission guidelines. And honestly, look at the response. Within seconds, it structured an entire draft tender document, right? Scope of work, done. Submission criteria, done. Evaluation metrics, matrix, it's in there, right? So how long would this actually typically, usually take you or your team to build from scratch, right? Hours, days, maybe, right? So now imagine just using this as a base. Once you have the results, you can obviously tweak a few details, plug in your specific project info, and then, you're 80% of the way there. And the beauty is the way and the better that you guys prompt your AI platform that you're using, the better the answer that you're going to get, right? So here's just the second half. It kind of continues with bid submission and evaluation, key contact terms, even clarification windows for payment structures, right? I know we had a question about that in our Q&A. So I think that, just looking at the people attending today, there's a wealth of experience here, right, joining us. So you might be thinking, hey, I've been doing this for a long time. I've got a great formula and structure for being able to do this in my sleep, more or less, right? And to that I say, excellent. But by leveraging AI, one of two things are going to happen, right? You're either going to take even something small away and add it to your already robust process, or you're going to prove that your method is better and that you're actually indeed smarter than AI. So congrats to you. But this really, guys, is not about replacing expertise. It's about supercharging it. Okay, so another question for you guys. If you could get even 80% of what you need, where would you then spend that saved time, right? Maybe more alignment with stakeholders. Maybe it's reviewing contractor history. Heck, maybe it's even just getting more time to be face-to-face, going for an actual lunch or coffee or something, right? So the opportunity here is not just run faster execution, it's better execution. And the best part, anybody in this room right now can start using this approach immediately. Okay. So quick word from our sponsors, which, believe it or not, is us. What I wanted to note, guys, we have been doing lunch and learns over the course of the last year or so. I think we're, over 20 of them now. So we put on an awesome presentation. We're able to tailor the content based on your specific needs and the audience that we're going to be presenting to. We're happy to do this at your office. We can bring you guys into our office. We can even do this virtual if you guys are, remote based and everybody's kind of dispersed. So yeah, we'll come in, whether it's this content, another piece of content, or, Heinrich and I have actually been working on new content. So sneak peek for you guys there, but happy to bring that in. We'll provide you and your team with an awesome lunch and just get some time to interact. So if you oversee continued learning or want to point me in the direction of the person that does at your office, more than happy to connect after this presentation here. So, okay, that's enough from me. I'm going to pass things back off to Heinrich. He's going to take us through stage 2 project closeout process. Heinrich, take it away.
All right. Thanks again, Stephen. Okay, so stage 2. So bringing it way back. Oh, and you know what? Just to double click on what Stephen said there about AI, and diving into that, man, like it really does help at literally every stage of this process. I would just encourage, if there's anything that you're like, I'm not certain here, you can just type it in and leverage it as a tool to help, even with specific trade details, right? If there's a lack of clarity there, it really helps on that. And it helps in the project closeout process here as well, if there's any hiccups. So just consider leveraging that tool. It's getting better and better literally every day, as I think we all know, right? So with that in mind, let's dive into the project closeout process. So what is this about? This is really the meat and potatoes here. You've done those 2 key preparation steps, right? You've had that project tender meeting and selected the right contractor coming out of it, right? And you feel you've got really great alignment there, dealt with any issues up front. You even had that pre-production meeting as the project started and made sure that, great, like, we are set up for success, stakeholders are aligned, we've got a great communication process. Okay, and the project has now been trucking along, going nice and smoothly. and we're at that tensions are not super high, things are pretty good, but now we're at that end of the job process, and I think everybody gets a little bit more stressed at the end because it's the end of a project, and this is when things can go sideways, right? So what we're going to go through here is the 4 key things that you should do or ensure are done on a project to close it out effectively. And look, it will even say, even from our standpoint, like these things, if they're done, it does not guarantee success. Again, we have a little like, if all else fails, what do you do? And we'll get to that. But they definitely improve the likelihood that a project is going to close effectively. And that's what this is all about, right? Just improving those odds. And for us, again, here at WCP, I mean, we strive to use these 100% of the time, but sometimes for whatever reason, they don't quite go perfectly, and we feel the pain of it, right? It just happens. It goes without saying, right? So we'll go through these, we'll dive into them one by one, speak about them and why they're so important. Okay, let's do it. And we're gonna actually start with a pitfall, right? So, and that is, and the too early is there for reasons of ownership getting involved too early. So why is that a problem? And I'm sure likely some, most, or even all of you have experienced this, where you have an eager ownership, whether it's on a, commercial, whether it's residential, and they kind of hop in while a contractor trade is doing their thing, right? And they start just like listing deficiencies, issues, problems, and so forth, right? Now, look, if it's a legitimate concern or issue, that's one different thing. But it's another thing if the project's partway through and there's just a litany of deficiencies that are getting thrown towards you, towards the contractor. This is a big issue, right? And this is about having clear communication up front to say, let ownership know in general, you'll have your say. You'll be able to dive in and chime in, right? But now's not the time, not in the middle of the project, right? Wait until the contractors come and said, we are officially complete and ready for review. Then ownership can get involved. That's really important, right? And it streamlines the process, okay? So just wanted to highlight that pitfall as it pops up. Okay, let's move in. So here we go, the 4-step process. Step number 1, and it's funny. Some of these seem obvious, but they're not necessarily obvious. And this first step is the contractor declares the project is ready for review. Now, some of you might be like, yeah, well, obviously, but it doesn't always happen, right? There's times that a project just kind of drags on, and then an invoice appears, and that's it, right? So it's like, it is important that there's like, hey, we have completed the project. And what does a contractor completing the project look like, internally on their end and ready for review? It means they've done their own internal deficiency walkarounds, right? Like they have done everything on their end to ensure the project is dialed in, right? And ready to go. Then and only then, and you want to confirm that, right? Then and only then can we move to the next step once they've actually gone through, done that, and declared that being the case. Okay, so simple step, but a crucially important step in this process. Okay, so then we move to number 2. And that is an ownership walkthrough. So we just talked about it earlier in terms of it being a pitfall of ownership getting involved too early, right? So this could be whether it's a commercial project, say it's a commercial warehouse with a whole bunch of strata units. Perhaps it's a multi-unit residential project, where there's balconies galore. This is a 120 unit townhouse complex or low rise, and there's a bunch of owners that have their yards, balconies, what have you. It's going to be important to allow owners to have a say, right? This can be of real value on these sorts of projects, to allow them to have a say. Why do you do this? You do it to ensure that a week after the project has been closed, that you don't have an owner chiming in and saying, hey, what about this and this and this? So there's a straightforward process you can go through on this. You can get everybody, to have like a defined, clear period of time, say a week, to identify any concerns or deficiencies, send those through. The contractor reviews and addresses those prior to the lead up of an actual final walk around, right? So a really important step. So defining, ready to move to the next step once this is done and the contractor has taken care of any of those concerns that have been addressed up once the owners have had their say. Okay,
And
next.
Heinrich, just as a note, would you say in your experience, even going through the necessary process, contractors declared the project is ready, you've done your deficiency walkthrough, then the ownership does a walkthrough, and then they're starting to nitpick at things. Do you still find that in the projects that you've overseen?
Oh yeah, no, it can absolutely happen. 100%, right? You'll get that scenario and it comes down to making sure, and you might have situations where certain ownership, like again, aren't clear on what the scope of work even was. It happens all the time. They're like, wait a second, my balcony deck wasn't redone. It's like, well, that actually wasn't part of the scope of work. That's
Right.
that's part of the reason why you're not happy with it, because it wasn't it wasn't in there. So those sorts of things happen all the time, but it's still really important to go through that process. Clear noticing and clear communication to the broader ownership here is key. So a notice to identify, hey, like this was the scope of work, this is what's being completed, please take the time and review on your end, just to ensure, that there's nothing that you see or note, and many times, people don't even check, they don't even review, right? But there are those that can and will, and it's giving them a chance to do that, right, to ensure that everybody is satisfied. All right, on to the next stage, crucially important, and that's this final inspection. So good. The contractors declared things are ready for review. The ownership has done a quick walk around. They've had their say. Now it's the time to actually do a final inspection. What makes this unique, like previous meetings, everybody's coming together, all the important stakeholders coming together and doing that final walk around. At this point, ideally, at this point, this is a reveal more than anything else. Because of the other previous two steps have been done effectively, this is really just a, hey, let's just walk around, let's make sure everything looks good. Couple outcomes for this section. If there's any deficiencies, they're identified, right? Oh, well, we've got this and this. Any other concerns or problems? Maybe something's popped up that just needs to be addressed and bring everybody together to do that. That gets taken care of, ideally done before, but maybe it happens here. And the second thing, really important, is that there's a clear schedule to complete those last items, deficiencies or anything additional. That clear schedule is identified, documented, communicated, and everybody's on the same page as to when things are going to get done. Okay, so very important step in the final inspection process. And on that note, I think we have another tool. Yes, tools galore. This one, the job close form, right? So coming right out of what we just talked about, this is something that, again, will provide to you here. Why is this of value? It's a value for a few reasons. I mean, it just gives a good guideline, administrative details that you can use and leverage. And then there's a specification and scope closeout area where, and again, it won't come in this format. It's going to be more of a spreadsheet that you can use and adapt. But this is just this is a form that you can pass on to an on-site contact or even a contractor. Be like, hey, use a version of this, in the process, and then submit it afterwards. Great way that you can leverage this. Identify deficiencies, let's document those, send that through so everybody's on the same page, right? Give me timing as to when they're going to be done, et cetera, et cetera. We even have demobilization process. We're going to speak about that shortly. Project completion documents, if any, what do those look like? Final invoicing specifics, et cetera, right? So some valuable things in there. Again, specific trade might have additional things or different things, so you can adjust and adapt that accordingly, right, on your specific project. Good, okay. And rounding it out to the final step here, the demobilization, right? So we've gone through, we've hit all the other steps, contractors declared things, the ownership walkthrough has happened, and those deficiencies or concerns have been addressed. Final inspection, a walk around on site with the key stakeholders, and now the deficiencies, if any, have been done, finalized. Let's demobilize, right? So demobilization, more specifically in plain language, just means all the items, the equipment on site is being removed. So boom lifts, scaffolding, toilets, any other fenced off areas, tools inside a common area, for example, that need to be addressed. All of that gets demobilized and importantly, cleaned up, pictures are taken, high fives are had, everybody's happy, and the project gets finalized, right? The project is fully demobilized, and there's clear alignment again on how long this will take, when it gets done, right? And then confirmation that that process has been completed as well. And that's it, right? That's the final step in this project closeout process. Okay, so boom, Steve lays it down there as he passes it through to this. What happens? We've tried to do all these items. We've tried to move things along, and despite everything, something's gone sideways. Perhaps it's a contractor that just, there's an issue on site where things just do not go well, right? And there's deficiencies all over the place, and whole areas haven't been completed, or somebody walks off the job, or maybe it's on the client end. Maybe you just have conflict with client and contractor, or a frustrated client that just hops in and causes all sorts of issues. There can be any number of problems and concerns. I mean, we had a real world example a couple years back, and there's many of these where we were doing an interior renovation and the project was moving along smoothly, but we had a designer who was on the ownership on Strata but not involved in the process, that hopped in to get involved, to insert herself in the process. And she had all sorts of opinions about how the scope of work should have been, and this, and it derailed things because that's not what Strata had agreed upon, right? But she came in partway through the process, quite close to the end, right, to say, hey, no, it should be this way. Like, we want to adjust the scope and do this. And it caused all sorts of conflicts. So how did it get resolved? So, like, what did we do ultimately to address that? And it's the answer every time: bring everybody together on site, in person, and address it. Identify the issue or issues, right? And get aligned as to how they're going to be addressed. Try to avoid, once emails become just a absolute, we've all experienced this. You have this just like, ongoing back and forth of emails all over the place, and it's not going anywhere. It's not the way, right? There's a point where it's just like, nope, we need to all meet on site and resolve this. Yes, the last thing we want to do is all have another meeting and drive out to this site and go through this process, but trust me, it is the way to resolve it. Resolving it in person, if it's at the level of extremity that is required, is going to be key, to formulate this and finalize it. So really important step: have that meeting in person, get aligned, get clear on what needs to be done, and away you go. Okay. So a little review of what we've accomplished here overall. And this is sort of like, look, if you've kind of paid attention to nothing else, just a really quick little recap of our key steps through this process, and then we'll dive in and look at some potential questions. So, preparation phase: prepare for that seamless job close. How do you do that? Have a great project tender meeting. This is right at the beginning, even before you've selected a contractor. This makes sure that everybody's on the same page, and it helps you select the right contractor. We know that if you do that, oh man, this project is going to go more smoothly, right? So that's a really important step in the process. You've got the right contractor. Now a pre-production meeting to make sure all stakeholders are on the same page and aligned. You are set up for success. Okay, so huge important preparation steps in that job close process. You've done that. Now you're into the project close. Those 4 key steps to make sure that things get finalized. Incredibly important. So you're making sure that the contractor is declaring, yes, things are finalized, we're ready for review. That's taken care of. Tick. Second piece, the ownership gets involved, right? Has their quick review, sends to the contractor any deficiencies or any issues that they see. Those get addressed. Tick. Next, the final walk around in person. Everyone comes together. You're taking care of that, identifying any final items that need to be addressed. They get addressed. Tick. And the demobilization. Everything gets demobilized. The site gets nicely cleaned. Pictures, before and afters, everybody's happy, the project is closed, right? So those are our key takeaways at a high level. And that's it. Back over to you, Stephen.
Right on. Yeah, thanks, Heinrich. Okay. So before we conclude, we wanted to open the floor for some questions. We had some that came through, so I'll comb through those, and Heinrich and I will address those now. But yeah, I just wanted to invite everybody that's on the call. If you have questions as it relates to either the presentation that we just went through, any comments, or honestly, any questions about any upcoming building renewal, construction, projects that you guys have, and you've got an issue or something, now is kind of the time where you've got Heinrich, who would be a phenomenal resource to you. So any questions, feel free to pop those in there. I'd be remiss if I did not mention, once again, we are doing the $200 Amazon gift card giveaway. So that is very much up for grabs at the moment. Easy way to enter there is just by asking the best question, and Heinrich and I will select that towards the end. Before we do that, this was actually a question or more of a comment that came in last time Heinrich and I did this presentation. And I feel like it's an important distinction, because speaking to ownership involvement too early during the closeout process, we had someone who had asked, hey, is this not way too late for ownership involvement? Which is a good question, and is absolutely accurate. Simply put, when we're talking about ownership involvement, this is just in relation to the actual closeout process itself. Of course, ownership, key stakeholders, decision makers, they're going to be involved in that process throughout. So when we're talking about ownership involvement not happening until after the contractor is declaring that the project is complete, that would just relate to this step in particular. But obviously, as you're doing your contractor selection, your tendering, your scoping, all of those aspects that are happening prior to the actual completion of the project, yes, you would have ownership, stakeholder input basically throughout that process. So just wanted to make note of that, because as Heinrich was presenting on that, it made me remember that important distinction. But anyway, okay. So going over to the Q&A chat box here, just filtering through some of these, I feel as though we answered as we went throughout the presentation. So if there's any follow-up questions that you guys need, again, please feel free to answer them now or ask them now. I guess the first one just came in, Heinrich, maybe you can speak to this one. The question is, what happens if I'm not happy with the job done? Will the contractor redo work? Is there any discounts that is given? Or, I'm sure, Heinrich, we've come across this scenario. So how would you kind of manage that from a contractor standpoint? And then I suppose, what is a good expectation to set from a property manager standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, that question very much speaks to like the key pieces we spoke about in this job close. If you're ultimately not happy, like that's why we follow these steps, because there's going to be clear communication throughout, and if you're the owner, right, or the manager, you're going to be able to have your say, right, at that. You're going to go through, contractor's going to declare the project finished as said. Ownership's going to step in, so you might be in that point and you can have your say then, right? And or at that final walk around, right? With the key decision makers, so probably the owner's representative and others are all going to come together, right, and get aligned. And if there's an issue, that's the time. Like you speak to it and address it. Likely, though, if those other steps have been followed, things are probably in a good place, right? Which is fantastic, But at that time, great. If there's a misalignment in person, you're looking at the property and you address that together. You say, great, okay, this is it. You refer back to the scope of work, to the approved proposal. You get aligned. Okay, have we delivered on this? Has this been finalized or not? If not, okay, well, then there's an issue and that needs to be addressed and confirmed. And that's the process you go through.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah. What's funny? We do get questions a lot about holdback, invoice holdback. We get that quite often. And honestly, Heinrich, maybe we even just need to bake it into our presentation as a point to speak to it. But it is a topic of conversation. And, I just wanted to make sure that it's clarified, because one of the questions we have is when can we expect to request the release of the 5 to 10% holdback? We actually had another attendee, Kelly, over at Turner Meakin. He, he answered and he said that the waiting period to pay the holdback is about 55 days from the date the stat deck is completed and submitted. But I just was curious, Heinrich, about your thoughts. Have you seen sort of different ranges? What is typically like a standard procedure there?
Yeah, no, it's pretty standardized in the industry by design, right? So, generally it's going to be a 10% holdback on invoices as they come through. The reason you're doing that is, quite frankly, it's to, if you're the owner or the owner's representative, it's to protect you, right? It's to make sure that you're going through that process, you're having that holdback in place, right? So that, if anything is problematic, right, that you have that, frankly, that a little additional piece of leverage right there. That's the reason. That's why that's done. Yeah, referring to the stat deck or statutory declaration, that's just an additional piece that's important, especially if you have a like a large project with a lot of different contractors involved and subs that start to get into the equation. Why that's important is it's like a sworn declaration by the prime contractor that yes, this has been completed and everybody has been paid. That's really important, right? That's declared, that's aligned on, right? And you actually send that through and you're kind of making that declaration as a contractor. And once that's done, then there's, the he who or they who are going to pay out the project, they go through that process and say, great, we've got our stat deck. We can feel comfortable paying out the remaining amount of this project. And as referenced, yeah, the standard period for final holdbacks, 55 days, right? That's the duration. And this is all baked in, right? This is all standardized in the industry, which is fantastic. So yeah, important points.
Great. Good question coming through from Julia here. So Julia's question is, would it be a good idea to get at the end of the project an inspection by an independent inspection company? Is that something that you've come across, Heinrich, at all?
Yeah, I mean, we didn't speak to it in this presentation. We certainly have in others. And the question is always like, when is it right to get an inspector involved? When is that, the right time? Generally, first off, generally we do it at the onset of a project, and it's usually okay. There's a level of complexity on this project that is high and or like it's quite a sizable project. It's just like we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars in terms of the project size. It can become of value with high levels of complexity, where really the ownership is not very versed in any of the specifics and it's hard to know. And it's like the sheer amount of size. It's like, hey, you know what? In those scenarios, perhaps an engineer gets involved as a third party. Perhaps an inspector gets involved as a third party, right? And they guide through the process to make sure that the project is getting completed effectively, right? In alignment with standards that trade inevitably enforces, right? So that's the benefit of doing that. The downside, there's almost always an additional cost, right? Sometimes significantly, so it's picking and choosing when the right time is, to do that. And you might be like scratching your head as an owner or owner's representative, like when is the right time? And that is like talk to your contractor and you can reach out to these inspectors as well proactively if you're having that and just say like, hey, would this project be a good fit for this? And if you have good people, good relationships, they'll probably be pretty honest with you, right? There's times definitely where we're like, this is a project we would recommend an engineer on, and here's why, right? Because of this level of complexity on these trades, right? We suspect this would be a good call and do that. So that's the broader way to answer that question. Getting more directly to what Julia was referencing. Specifically at the end, I would only involve an inspector of some kind right at the end of the process if you're just having difficulty finalizing the project. Like something has happened there that it's really not going smoothly, then you can do that. Why I'd only do it in that scenario, if it's really just like you're just continuously bashing your head against the wall, is because, bringing them in, they then need to get versed with the project specifics, get caught up on everything that's happened since the beginning. And that can be really difficult if you haven't brought them in right from the onset, them being an inspector. So it's a last resort if things are not going well. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, great answer, Hendrik. And the caveat to that and a follow-up from Julia. So I'm just going to read it. She said deficiencies would need to be fixed before the return of the holdback. The inspector at the end would be on top of the project manager that is inspecting during the progress of the work. And then her question is that feasible?
Yeah, so in the first part, definitely deficiencies would absolutely need to be fixed before any holdback. Like that's par for the course, right? You're going through that process and making sure that's the case, 100%. So yeah, that's very standard. And then in terms of the inspector, if there was an inspector involved, then yes, absolutely. Like if an inspector is involved, really they kind of act as a representative of the owner, so they're kind of stepping in and they're working with a project manager, trade, contractor to ensure that, things are being inspected appropriately, and they are ultimately the ones signing off. In the case of if an engineer is involved, it's a different level because they're ultimately giving their engineering stamp, right? So that's a big deal, right? Like if they're doing that, that's their reputation on the line that it's been done in accordance with specification, right? If they give that stamp and it's not, well, that's their reputation once again, right? So yeah, that would be kind of the process, and it's very feasible.
Well, great questions, everyone. That was really insightful. It just helps to have that Q&A session. I feel just because it produces some really great organic content, and thank you to Heinrich for answering those knowledgeably. And we're going to move into just the close of the presentation here because we're coming up on about 2 minutes left. But wanted to note in terms of next steps and what you can kind of expect from us here moving forward. So we went through a ton of resources in terms of tools, templates. We're going to be sending that all to you guys as a follow-up, including actually access to this deck. So if there's anything that you guys wanted to refer back to, you're more than welcome to. And then, contact us. There's going to be questions that come up, not even maybe just in relation to this presentation, but just questions about, potential projects that you guys have ongoing. I mean, you guys saw what our services encompass. So if you have anything upcoming where you feel that WCP Building Renewal would be a good fit, please reach out. We are truly here to help, and we'd love an opportunity to work with you guys and continue to work with you guys. So, and then lastly, lunch and learns. So if you oversee continued learning, or if you know of the person at your office that oversees continued learning, we'd love to bring this content or another piece of content into your office, share it with your colleagues. And again, we'll come in and we'll provide an awesome lunch to you guys. But on that note, on behalf of Heinrich and myself, I just wanted to say thank you guys so much for spending the last hour with us. We're really looking forward to staying in touch, and we'll see you again really soon.
Thanks, everyone.